Hey everyone, I've just been finishing working on a few new patterns and I thought it might be helpful if I took a step back and just demonstrated a few basics of sewing. I've been sewing for almost all my life, like literally since I was probably 5 or 6 years old. But I know that's not the case for a lot of people. I had the benefit of having a mother who sewed and a grandmother who lived next door who sewed. So I had a lot of hands-on instruction. And then, of course, I also studied fashion design when I went to college. So there's a lot of things that I just assume everybody knows, which obviously is not the case. Everybody starts somewhere. So today I'm just going to talk about some basics when it comes to putting together specifically a digital sewing pattern, so a PDF sewing pattern, and then how to place that on your fabric. There are some symbols on a sewing pattern that if you're new to sewing, you might not be familiar with them. So that's what I'm going to walk through today. This is what the pattern looks like when you open it in Adobe Reader, and I do recommend using Adobe Reader. It's free to download. So click on Print. Make sure your settings are set to actual size, or if for some reason you don't see actual size, you can also use the custom scale and make sure it's set to 100%. You can also select the page range so that you're not wasting paper. Sometimes you don't need to print every single piece for each style. And from there, you can just go ahead and press print. So when you print out a sewing pattern, it's going to look something like this. This is how my patterns are formatted. And mine in particular, my newer ones, have a no trim margin. But in some sewing patterns, including some of my older ones, you'll need to trim off the margins. But that's not the case with this one. So one of the first things you might notice is there is a size guide here that is color coded. And then there's also this 1x1 square. So you're going to want to measure this to make sure that your pattern has printed out correctly. And then choose the size that closest corresponds to your size. So you can see the way it prints out is not the complete pattern. The complete pattern is tiled over a number of pages. So in this particular pattern, it's a very small pattern. It's only 2 pattern pieces. So it's fairly simple to put together. You just find the adjoining page. So this is page 1 and this is page 2. You line it up along the margin line and then take some tape. Tape it in place. I like to flip it over and do a little bit of tape on the back as well, just to make the pattern a little bit more stable. So I currently wear a size teal, so I'm going to go ahead and cut out along the teal line. There are some lines that all of the sizes share. For instance, this upper edge and the center front line. So just go ahead and cut along there. I have to be honest, I know a lot of sewers are actually a lot more exact than I am. When I look at my pattern piece, I look at it as my rough template for the size of, or for the shape that I need to achieve the final goal. But in my opinion, with any pattern, you're going to want to play around with it a little bit. So your first time sewing a garment should always be a test, just to see how it fits, to see if there's any changes you want to make. Because again, this is just the basic template. So there's my front pattern piece. And then in this one, it's really easy. There's only 2 pieces to put together. And then I would again cut out along the teal line for myself. So looking at this pattern piece, there is this crazy line here and it says place on fold of fabric. So anytime you see this line that has the 2 90-degree angles and the arrows, that means you're going to fold your fabric and then place your pattern piece so that this line runs alongside the fold of the fabric. There's also an indication of where the greatest degree of stretch is going to be. So you want to make sure that you've got the most stretch going around your garment And on this particular one, you need to place it on a scalloped edge of lace. So this is very specific to like lingerie patterns in my experience. That's not something you're going to see on every sewing pattern, but it is one that you will see on this one, which is my Meadow bra. So I have this lace here. It's nice and wide, and I'm going to show you how I would place this piece. So fold it. And when you're working with lace specifically, I like to make sure that my scallops are lined up nice and evenly so that you have a symmetrical balance. Oh, I need to fold it out a little bit more. Okay, so there it is. I've got it folded here. So I'm going to take my edge and place it along the fold. And this, where it indicates that it needs to be placed along the scalloped edge, is placed along the scalloped edge. From here, you can either pin your pattern piece or you can use pattern weights to just keep it in place while you cut. And then, like you did earlier when you cut out the actual paper pattern piece, you'll take your scissors or a rotary cutter, whatever you're most comfortable with, and just cut along the edge. When you're working with a larger pattern that involves more pages, it does require a little bit more work to assemble, so make sure you've got them numerically in order. Tape them together. Just keep working so that your page numbers are going numerically. And then you'll find you're going to work on a second row. So I like to tape my rows together and then tape them one on top of the other, which is what I'm doing here. And I just tape where my pattern pieces are. When it comes to placing a pattern piece on a fold that doesn't involve scalloped lace, you start with a single layer of fabric, making sure you've got the direction of stretch going horizontally. Fold it. So now you've got 2 layers. Make sure you don't have any wrinkles or creases. That's really important. Take your pattern piece and just like before, place it so that line, that one edge, that center front edge in this case, is right alongside the fold. And then you can cut around the perimeter. For a pattern piece that does not get placed on fold, for instance, this, which is the bra band, you still need to cut 2. So on the pattern, it indicates what the piece is, so this, or what the pattern is, which in this case is the Meadow bra. It indicates what the piece is, so in this case it is the back, and it indicates how many of what you should cut. So this says to cut 2 lace. So again, I'm working with lace, but the same would go the same for a regular fabric. Your fabric will be folded in half, and so you have essentially 2 layers. This pattern piece has a grain line, so you want this to go parallel to the selvage edge of the fabric, or the tightly woven kind of continuous edge of fabric. And you want the greatest degree of stretch to be going, again, horizontally around the garment. So I would place my pattern piece like this. So you can see my grain line is parallel to my fold line or my selvage line. Again, put your pattern weights on or pin it, and then cut it all the way around. So when you're finished, you're going to have 2 mirror images of that pattern piece. The other thing you'll see on sewing patterns sometimes are colored dots, which will indicate placement for a strap or some other detail. In mine, I've color coded them, so this is roughly where you're going to place the strap for the teal bra. You can transfer these to a pattern using carbon paper. You could just put a pin where you put it. I tend to, I have to admit, I'm an eyeballer. So that's usually what I do, is I will then kind of just eyeball where I want it to be, or measure. That's the other thing you can do. So essentially those are the main things that you're going to see on most basic sewing patterns are grain lines, cut on fold lines, your label with all the information on how much to cut and what to cut, as well as your degree of stretch and any other specifics. Like for instance, in this bra pattern, it has the place along scalloped edge indicator. Some patterns too will also include a stitching line. So this pattern has a dart, so I have included a stitching line, which again, you could transfer, but it's more for you just to kind of see how your finalized dart will be. I hope that's helpful for you, and let me know if there's any other sewing questions you have. Doesn't matter how basic they might seem, I'm happy to go over them with you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.